I make a very strong point that agility in the world of learning and development and OD can't be separated from design thinking. So, and that's where you get that human-centric design. That's where you get that good discovery work. And it is that kind of concept of prototyping and testing before you go anywhere near kind of implementation. And so I think, and the reason I kind of emphasize that is that often Agile can be seen as kind of delivering the project, so you might use a Kanban board or a Scrum board. You might effectively manage your backlog, and then you start to deliver in iterations. But if you don't know what the problem is to solve yet, or you actually haven't spent time doing that discovery, then you start running that project and you'll keep running into problems where you go, oh, actually, we've just delivered something and it hasn't landed the way we thought. And I've found that when I work with L&D teams and people teams, that we often start projects without clearly understanding the problem that we need to solve, because we're going to deliver a leadership program that we've talked about is needed, but we haven't really decided, well, what's the problem that we're solving here with this leadership program? So design thinking, I think, is invaluable. You can do it, of course, continuously through your Agile project, but it's particularly useful at the start. And I even sort of advocate doing what I call a design sprint, where you actually spend time researching and then defining problems. And then you come out of that with a list of prioritized problems to solve. And that's your project. Okay, we're going to start with this problem, or we're going to try and run with 2 problems first. We're going to actually start to get solutions out for those and then keep going from there. So that's why I put the 2 together. And then what I've found is that as people start to use these methods and start working in these more multidisciplinary ways, there's been some design principles that really kind of guide the way people work, and is also what I've kind of based this second book on. So principle 1 is human-centered design. So this idea of how do you empathize with the experience of work? How do you properly research what's going on through personas, experience mapping, interviews, data, all of it. So how do you actually do an evidence-based research and then move this into a design that is user-friendly, that's going to add value to the human experience? The next one is T-shaped people and T-shaped teams. So this is working multidisciplinary. Product mindset. So we need to start to embrace this idea that we build products and we manage products, and therefore you might kill products as much as release new ones. This idea of, what is the products and services that make up the employee experience? Principle 4 is experimentation, of course, and MVP. And 5 is deliver with impact. So how do we know that we're delivering? What's the measurement? And then, of course, principle 6 is scalability. So all of that's great, but can you do it at scale? And what I've found is that if you properly test it and you do that kind of sequence of, sketch it on the notepad first, and then run a little experiment, and then run a longer experiment, then run a kind of minimal viable product pilot. By the time you then say, right, let's release it to 100,000 people, you're fine because you've validated at every step. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess in some ways are these steps that we need to follow in order to an extent. Like you said, the human-centered part helps us understand what the problem is. Once we know the problem, we work out the people we need to work with in the T shape, like the multifaceted. Then we can kind of work out what the product is, and then we kind of experiment. We know the goals. So in some ways, it sounds like maybe they're to be followed in order.
It is, though nothing is linear anymore. So, but yeah, I very much so. I think when I tested these design principles are ones that I've used with some of the teams I've worked with over the last few years, and some of them have actually come from the team. So they've actually, as they start to transform and change their ways of working, they've set out key design principles. But I also was speaking to a senior L&D leader that I think is a great agilist, and they made the comment that, you need to start with the kind of almost the mindset of the human-centered design and then go from there. And that is key. Yeah.